views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime. Of course, we thank you for being with us on this show. If anybody asks the question, what is the Social Justice Forum all about? Well, it's a show that deals with many of the inequities, that many people face, particularly in communities of color. Also, it gives us an understanding to understand some of the issues that are being dealt with, and also presenting some multiple points of view, and then promoting civic engagement. It's all a part of today's show. Talk a little bit about COVID-19, how one doctor is working to save lives, and that and some more here on the Social Justice Forums. Stay with us. We begin right now. And welcome back to the show. With people of color experiencing a higher death rate from COVID-19 than any other ethnic group in America, they also currently have the lowest rates of individuals being vaccinated. Many Black and brown communities are hesitant on receiving the vaccination given the history of mistreatment that's gone on, particularly for Black patients in medical research. Our first guest is an infectious disease expert. He's also a trauma surgeon and a military veteran with the mission to change today's COVID-19 statistics, creating a brighter tomorrow. His grassroots effort include traveling across the country and the world, appearing in virtual town halls and meetings, speaking and educating organizations and businesses about COVID-19 and how they can protect themselves from the impending second wave of viruses and these latest strains. Joining us now to share this point of view on the matter, we're pleased to be joined by the Director of Clinical Education and Research at Tropical Pathology and Infectious Disease Association, Dr. Lane Rowling. And Dr. Rowling, good to have you here with us here on the Social Justice Forums.
No, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your platform, and let's have a great talk and educate people's lives and just save some folks' lives.
Yeah, well, let's get right at it. I mean, when we talk about COVID-19, we're now in the vaccination phase, and I know you're doing a good job of educating people and being what is known as a credible messenger. But we understand, particularly in communities of color, there is a huge skepticism about the vaccination. So let's walk through the vaccination for a minute, and from your perspective, give us what you think with regards to how it's going with the vaccine rollout.
Well, I mean, let's keep it real. The vaccine rollout has been a failure. I mean, we've had up to 500,000 people have died. We're going to have more people going to die by June 1st, probably another 500,000. And one particular population that's very hesitant to take in any vaccination is minorities, especially African Americans, people on the Indian reservations, even Mexican Americans. And the reality is this has to go back to having a concrete message where people can believe in the system. And that's a big problem, that we don't have that belief in the system, because like you said in your introduction, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, a radiation experiment, the Fannie Lou May, sterilization of Black women. And we can go on and on of the horrors that our medical society has treated Black people like animals. And then all of a sudden now you have a mass pandemic that's killing everybody, making people sick. It's going to be around for many, many years. And then you're expecting the Black folks to step up to the plate, not based off of science, but based off of feel good. And the science has not caught up with the vaccination. And that's just the reality.
Yeah, we talk about vaccinations. We understand in New York, there's, we've got about 4 million people in New York, the state of New York. And then at one point, there's about 250,000 doses that come to New York State every week. In New York State alone, that would take 6 months for people to ultimately be vaccinated, right? And then you fan that out across 62 counties in the state. Vaccine can be definitely slow. Talk to us a little bit about those persons who are wanting to receive the vaccine. A lot of people have questions about Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. Is there a better vaccine that one should take?
Yes, there is. And that vaccine is not out yet. But let me step back, because I think it's very important for especially African Americans in vaccination. I think one of the first questions that we have to understand is that when people talk about African Americans, they talk about healthcare disparities. They talk about diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, obesity. But one of the things they never ask us black folks and the black folks that are getting the vaccination, do you have sickle cell? I mean, sickle cell disease, sickle cell trait is huge. 1 in 350 black folks have that particular genetic disease. What is the results of somebody getting a vaccination from Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson? Do they ask that question? And so once you ask that underlying question, have you really studied African Americans? Have you really put the vaccination, all the vaccination, into true health care for black folks? What is the results? But at the end of the day, the best vaccine that's going to be coming out is going to come out in about 6 months. And that vaccine is called COVAX, COVAXX, which is a game changer. And that is the vaccine that I'm going to get, my grandchildren are going to get. And that's going to be the vaccine that I sign off, because all these other vaccines you're looking at, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, they have that famous word, experimental use authorization, EUA. What does that mean? That vaccine is an experiment, and they're trying to figure out what the results are in the real field, looking for that famous word called vaccine effectiveness. And none of these vaccines have vaccine effectiveness. I've done the real clinical trials on black children, black folks with autism, pregnant females, people with sickle cell, people with diabetes, high blood pressure, etc. They're still trying to figure that out. And that's part of the big problem that the vaccine programs have, is the bad science and bad medicine that has not been articulated in a very clear, concise, and where people feel very happy about it.
You talk about COVAX. Give us a little bit more about COVAX. What makes COVAX so different, particularly when it comes to African Americans? I mean, you've got a lot of people now in their first wave getting the Pfizer, the Moderna. Some are, still waiting for Johnson & Johnson, which still has a 66% as of latest, effectiveness rate. Talk to us about what makes COVAX so different, and particularly for African Americans.
See, that's where you made a mistake, Ed. That is not right. Now, let me explain before I jump into COVAX. There are two words that all your platform people need to understand in vaccines. Now, because of my experience as a biological warfare weapons expert and all the positions I'm on, I need to explain that to people. There are two words. You have vaccine efficacy and you have vaccine effectiveness. Vaccine efficacy just means this. You get 100 people, the most healthiest people on the planet. You give 50 the patients of them the actual vaccine, and then you give the other 50 the placebo. And out of the 100 people, 2 people get a temperature. Well, they call that 98% efficacy. But 98% efficacy does not mean anything until you actually take that vaccine, put it in the field, real world situation, temperature change, Asian people, black folks, mamas that are breastfeeding. Does the virus go across the placenta? Have you given a vaccine to 1,000 sickle cell patients and 50% of them had reaction? That is what you're looking for, is vaccine effectiveness. So for example, AstraZeneca, Oxford vaccine, has a 10% effectiveness against the new South African mutant strain. They shut that program down in South Africa. And that is why we have to have more science and medicine to back up the vaccination, each and every one of them. The thing about COVAX is that COVAX is based off what we call multi-tope peptide. What it means is that we take a synthetic pattern of the actual spike protein, the mutant forms, and we make a vaccine based off of that, off of synthetic. We're not injecting a messenger RNA. We're not injecting a part of the virus. This is all synthetic. And through the research and the results and the science papers and the studies, we know that we have with that vaccine antibodies that are produced in the body that neutralizes the virus. Also, we have the most important thing, Daren, that people keep forgetting, is that you have long-term immunity based off of B cells and T cells, in which we call that affinity maturation and conferred immunity. Not one of these vaccines, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Oxford, none of these vaccines has what we call long-term immunity. That is why people have gotten the Pfizer vaccine, 1, 2 doses, and still got infected. You've had people have the dose of Pfizer, 1 and 2 doses, and die. This is what we're trying to figure out is vaccine effectiveness. But the COVAX vaccine is going to be, in my opinion, is going to be the world-changing vaccine that's going to really help mitigate and contain the SARS-CoV virus, the first pandemic and the second pandemic, driven by these 4,000 new mutant strains.
So let me ask if viewers out there right now and they're watching and they're saying, listen, all right, I've had the COVID vaccine. I've had maybe a Moderna. Maybe I've had a Pfizer. Maybe I've had a Johnson & Johnson. Would it harm them to, since you're saying COVAX is the one, to also have the COVAX?
No, my recommendation would be is that the COVAX is a different platform. And so people are not going to have the cross reactivity that they have with the Pfizer, the Johnson, the Moderna vaccine. The most important thing that you folks need to understand, if you are getting a vaccine from Pfizer or from Moderna, you have to be very careful that you don't end up what we call an antibody dependent enhancement. What does that mean? Well, folks that are getting the Pfizer and getting other vaccines are getting what we call idiopathic thrombocytopenia. They're bleeding out. They're losing platelets because the body is making antibodies to attack their body. And so that's always the consequences when you start injecting messenger RNA, attenuated or live vaccines into human beings. One of the consequences you can, after you give the first shot, you can have Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is paralysis of your body, or you can have Bell's palsy, paralysis of your face. So these are all the questions you need to ask yourselves before you start injecting. And I want everybody to understand that I'm a pro-vaccine person. I'm the guy who's been in the jungles for 30 years doing real-world missions up and down the Amazon, treating thousands of patients from measles, mumps, rubella, vaccinating kids and people and adults. And I've seen people die from vaccines not having them. So I'm a pro-vaccine person based off of science and medicine. And I'll be the first person to take the best vaccine that's going to save my life and my grandchildren's life, because we're not guinea pigs.
So when you look at what's happening right now, we've seen presidents take it, we've seen elected officials take it, we've seen others take the vaccine, saying trust the vaccine, right? Now we hear you, one might say, well, should I be waiting? Should I, and the numbers are rising, we're seeing what's going on. So what would be the best advice that you give people from your perspective?
Well, my perspective is from a person that has really done real infectious diseases in the jungles, from Ebola, chikungunya, malaria, dengue. I'm not some talking head individual. My experience is based off of not just didactics, because I got 6 degrees and 2 doctorate degrees, but also off of real world, application, applying the theory and seeing people die from everything from malaria, rabies, dengue, chikungunya, babies born without brains and stuff. I understand that. My point is that you have to make sure the science and medicine is equal to the actual vaccine that they're talking about. You say, well, people have gotten the vaccine. Yeah, Hank Aaron's dead. An orthopedic surgeon got the vaccine yesterday. He's dead. People are having reactions that are dying. So you can say that, well, what? Well, the consequence is that once you inject a vaccine into you, a platform like that, you cannot retrieve it. And you have to also understand that it usually takes 3 to 10 years for vaccines to come to the forefront, i.e. you have to have all the different subtypes. We have to test 1,000 people with sickle cell with the vaccine. We have to test 1,000 kids with autism, high blood pressure, black, white, kidney disease, people in nursing homes, and then you come up with what we call the vaccine effectiveness. If you don't have that, and you're only at 1/4 of the science and the research, what are you trying to do? Because the vaccine companies are the only ones that have what we call sovereign immunity. So if you get that vaccine, Daren, and you have a reaction, if somebody in your family has a sickle cell crisis, you can't sue them. You have to do the consequences. So my recommendation is making sure that you have the best information to make the best decision. That is the problem with African American healthcare disparities. We don't have a complete picture understanding of the complete science of medicine, and nobody ever takes the time to sit down and says, hey guys, let me explain to you the science of medicine, who's somebody that's qualified in there to break that information down so the common person can understand it. The way we're going to survive this and how we're going to make it, if you don't get the vaccine, it's still going to be basic biosafety, biosecurity protocols where you're going to still have to wear a mask. And that mask got to be an FFP3, the best mask in the business, 99% filtration. You better make sure you have the best antiseptic hand wash for your hands. You better have situational awareness. You better not wear your shoes in the house. You better make sure that you're doing the stuff that's going to save you and your family's life, making sure you're tested using PCR technology that is the most sensitive. You can find out your results within 3 hours. Stuff like that is going to make you survive because, folks, 98% of the people that get the SARS-CoV virus, they do great. They're fantastic. You might be sick, you get diarrhea, but you're going to live. And so that's important, that there is the basic immune system is beautiful, and your body will be able to fight off most infections, period.
You mentioned the FFP3 mask. We hear a lot about the N95, but what's the FFP3?
The FFP is the top mask in the planet versus N95. What do I mean by that? The N95 you hear about all the time. I use these in my leprosy and my tuberculosis clinic. My patients that have tuberculosis, that are some of the most infectious patients on the planet. You have KN95. You have F95, FN95. Well, the problem with these N95s is the insecurity of them. Most of these masks are fake. And so the FFP mask is certified, 100%. You can't get them, but maybe 1 or 2 locations in the United States and the world. And that FFP3 has 99% air filtration. That is what you're going to have as we move into this new pandemic, second one, with all these new virus mutants, from the South African strain, the London strain, the California strain, Brazil strain. And these viral mutants are more infectious, so you better have the best mask for yourself, and that is the FFP3.
I don't want to scare people, but give me a little perspective and your perspective on timetable. We're dealing with this virus right now. We talked about second wave. We're hearing about mutant strains. How long do you think that we'll be in this?
Well, let me explain to your audience, because that's probably the biggest problem that we've had over the last year. That's why 500,000 people have died. People are sick. There are long-term consequences. There will be another 500,000 people are going to die by June 1st. That's just the way it is. The reality is that nobody sat down and explained to people what the SARS virus is. The SARS virus is an RNA virus, largest one on the planet, very immunogenic, changes every 2 weeks. That's just a fact. And the bats is the original carrier of the coronavirus, because bats have over 400 different coronavirus they carry for millions of years. And out of them 400, 7 of them affect human beings. So when we talk about this pandemic, which is not a pandemic anymore, it's a global endemic infection. The disease is in the population to stay. Well, last year, what you're seeing in some of the remnants is the first pandemic. We're probably in the third wave of the first pandemic, driven by the Wuhan D614 strain out of China. Well, folks, guess what? The second pandemic started in January, probably December, driven by the mutant strains, the London strain, the South African strain, the Brazil strain, the SARS mink strain out of Denmark, the California strain. We have these new strains, these 4,000 different variants are driving the second pandemic. And the question is, how long is this going to go on, Dr. Rowling? Well, this is going to go on, this pandemic, endemic infection is going to go on a minimum of 5 to 10 years. And our society will never be back to what the normal was, but we have a new norm.
Taking a quick break. We'll be back more with Dr. Rowling in a few seconds. Stay with us here on the Social Justice Forums.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting BronxNet.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
And we are back here on the Social Justice Forums, continuing our conversation with Dr. Rolling, one who's considered and known as an expert, particularly in the area of the coronavirus, and been sharing a lot with us, particularly in the communities of color. And Dr. Rolling, I want to talk because when we look at this disease, we know that it is disproportionately affecting communities of color more than anyone else in America and literally across the world. So the question has to be asked about treatment. What kind of treatment is available to those, and particularly in communities of color?
Well, the basic treatment is that what happens is if somebody gets symptomatic, i.e. you have a temperature, to give you, fever reduction medication, Tylenol. If somebody has oxygen deprivation, desaturation, to give you oxygen. You got diarrhea, they treat the diarrhea. But actual effective treatment, there is only one medication that is out there approved by the FDA, and that's a drug called Noviracid. And Noviracid is the only drug that the FDA has approved for Black folks that have the COVID-19 disease. And in fact, there's only 4 places, locations in America you can get the actual pill at, and that's in Chicago, and that is in Jackson, Mississippi, Houston, Texas, and Los Angeles. And Black folks need to get themselves enrolled in this program, or they got somebody in their family that gets sick, they get tested because they have signs and symptoms, they're positive, and they're getting sick. They need to get this drug, which will prevent them from progressing or mitigate the signs and symptoms of adverse COVID-19 spectrum, where they go from being symptomatic, temperature, and then they end up being on a ventilator. It's a game-changing drug designed for Black folks. And that is the type of stuff we have to be a part of and have to be able to have confidence in the system that there are drugs specifically made for Black folks because we have a different physiology.
So then I guess the question is, why have we not heard about this? I mean, the fact of the matter is, your boots on the ground, but we don't hear about this drug. We've heard about, the drug the president took when he got COVID, but we don't hear about Noviracid.
Well, I am the guy on the boots on the ground. I'm the guy that's in the jungles, and I'm the doctor that's on the ground educating, what we call community educational spread, and bringing Black folks, our people, the best information based off of science and medicine. And so mainstream CNN, Fox, have you heard anybody besides what I talked about the other night on the Black News Channel about sickle cell disease and vaccine? You haven't heard that. But that sickle cell disease and trait is a huge genetic disease that we have. So we have to make sure that we have Black folks that really understand Black medicine, or what we call Black physiology, or people that look like us, to articulate the best information for our people based off of science and medicine. Because if you don't understand the medicine, you will never see the science. And if you definitely do not understand the science, you cannot know the medicine that's available. Hey, if you got somebody sick, get your folks in these studies. And that's the only way we're going to survive and get more confidence in the medical system. And when we're really a part of it and not having, being the experiment, but actually having participation in it.
You've done some work with the Congressional Black Caucus. I know that you've had an opportunity to work on their task force, particularly with this right here. Talk to me about the reception that you've received in terms of when you talk about Noviricid and the numbers and what's going on right now. How much are elected officials really, locked in to your findings?
Well, I think the locked in is that when they came and got me last year, the Congressional Black Caucus, they called me and I had no clue they were even looking at me, because I'm out here saving people's lives around the world. And, they said, Dr. Rowland, we have to have somebody like you. And I go, I'm a nobody. I'm not somebody special. And they said, they looked at my background and said, we have to have folks that look like you. And because your global experience in real world infectious diseases, I am the perfect person to be able to articulate a message and break the science down. To me, is a beautiful compliment, because it shows me that 30 years of my life that I've spent in the jungles is important. People take that as face value. For me to be nominated Global Humanitarian of the Year, I'll find out in June if I won that. The first Black person to ever be nominated that, to be considered an everyday hero on the documentary, to be on Lady Gaga's, big event in the summertime, Global Citizen, in between, Samuel Jackson and Denzel. I think my work in saving people's lives, I think my information has been effective, and it's going to continue to be effective, because like we say in the military, I am the guy with boots on the ground, telling the folks and winning the hearts and minds of my people, and then we'll work on everybody else's people.
So what would be your advice right now? We've got people out here running to take the vaccine, and they are getting vaccinated. You've got vaccination sites that are popping up all across the country now as more and more people are becoming vaccinated. If you could speak to communities of color, what would be your advice?
Well, I would tell people, make the best decision for yourself. Realize when you do make that decision, you own it, all the consequences. You don't get to sugarcoat it. You don't, like I say in the military, in my world, once you get out that boat, you better be prepared to go all the way with all that stuff. But you need to be smart. Also realize that each of these vaccines that you're taking, folks, you're going to have another vaccine. Period. The African South African strain vaccine is the South African strain vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine will have nothing to do with protecting you from the South African mutant strain. And the South African mutant strain vaccine will not protect you against the London strain. Each mutant has to have its own vaccines, because each vaccine is what we call static. It's not dynamic. They don't change. And so you will be having multiple injections and vaccination for the next 20 years. That's just a fact. That's science.
Wow. So if you got your vaccination now, just understand what you're saying, that there will have to be more that follow.
No, there's no understanding. That's a fact. That's 100%. There's no interpretation. There's no Fox News in there. There's no spin zone. This is the reality, period. You can take that to the bank.
So over the next 5 to 10 years, we can expect continuous vaccinations. And as we continue to get more and more strains, obviously more and more eyes will have to, put a look and see as to what's the best thing to do. So give us some advice. We're getting close towards the end of our segment, but give us some advice moving forward. As we're moving forward, trying to navigate right now with all that we're saying, all that we're hearing, your advice.
Well, I have a book that I wrote called Navigating in a New World, and people can get that book at www.auset/isis.org. And that book talks about navigating a new world. And our new world is that we're not going back to what it was 8 months ago or a year ago. Masks will be part of your standard wardrobe for the next 5 to 10 years. You'll be wearing 2 or 3 masks a week, changing them out. Masks will become part of your wardrobe. And that mask has to be an FFP3 for the time being because that's the best mask. You're going to have to wash your hands. Situational awareness on understanding basic biosecurity protocols and procedures, i.e., people don't realize that when you go out in public, all the touch screens that you touch, the kiosks are contaminated with feces, period. And for every 1 gram of feces, there's a billion viruses. When we look at the SARS COVID virus transmission, there are 2 transmissions that your people need to understand. One is respiratory. You better have the best mask. The second, where people don't think about, which is probably really making the pandemic gets transmitted globally, is fecal contamination. There are more SARS virus in your gastrointestinal tract than there are in your lungs. That's why people have massive diarrhea. That is part of the virus, the SARS virus way of getting out in the environment to infect people, i.e., people don't wipe their hands well. You go touch a touchscreen, you got fecal contamination on that Wells Fargo ATM machine, the kiosk at the airport, JFK, etc. The stores you go to, you touch the ATM card to buy your food or to pay for dinner. They're contaminated, and that's why you got to have the best technology for that and understand the environment. And one of the things I recommend that people get involved in is to look up My Fingers, MIFINGER, and you need to get the finger pads and get the best soap to wash your hands with. Have 360-degree protection. These are the basic things that's going to save your life and make sure that you don't become compliant and listen every month and become a student of science and medicine and understand what people are telling you. And if it doesn't feel right, make sure you get the right information so it does feel right for you.
Yeah, but when we talk about information, I mean, you've got 100 different media outlets. I mean, listen, I'm a journalist myself, right? I mean, I'm out here trying to do the best I can with what I've got. But there's a lot of misinformation that goes out there. So where do people latch in to find the best information, and particularly for the communities of color who've been disproportionately affected?
Well, I think the most important thing for you is that because you're part of that you understand journalism and stuff, that Fox and CNN, y'all got an F because 500,000 people died on your watch, and there's no excuses. You don't get to do a redo. This is 2021. And so you got to make sure that you find people that are qualified, have the background, real world experience, military trained, actually have done clinics and surgeries and seeing people's face fall off and the horror stuff. That is the person you want to be getting your information from, and not some guy drinking a Tai Chi Starbucks in Idaho that don't have a passport, but they're going to be determining stuff on black people, and they don't even know what black people look like besides what they see on television, and they don't know the difference between eating grits or cream of wheat. So that's the reality there.
Yeah. And so for people who want to get connected with you, what's the best way for people to get connected to you, find out more about what you're doing?
Well, they can go to Instagram, Dr. Rolling. They can get on my Facebook. I'm on the Black News Channel every Sunday night. And people, you can Google me, because what it is what it is. I've been everything from MSNBC, the Black News Channel. So most of the major outlets, I have some type of platform where I'm communicating to people on a regular basis I speak to probably about 500,000 people every week. And that's been like that for the last year. And then, and the work I continue to do, from Singapore to Dubai, to the United States, to Germany, South America, I'm going to continue to do that work, and people can follow my world.
Yeah. What's next for you now?
Singapore, Dubai, making sure that the science is vetted and the new technologies coming out, and also the fact of trying to continue to save children's lives in the jungles of the Amazon and Peru and Brazil, because you can imagine if black folks are having it rough here in the United States, you can imagine native Indians that actually live in these jungles that speak a totally different dialect. Their government's not taking care of them at all. And I'm hoping to God that when I get down there, that I'll be able to make an impact with my team to save their lives without them being exterminated or because of the disease itself. It's very important. I mean, when we look at what America did to Black folks, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy what the America here gave the Indians smallpox by putting smallpox on blankets. That was really the first genetic warfare battle here in the United States, was when the American soldiers gave the Indians smallpox on blankets, decimated them. And so my responsibility is to make sure that I continue to carry crosses and do the best I can with the time I do have and maximize that effort.
Yeah. And so as we look around the world, obviously a lot of concern is about here in America. Talk to us about the UK real quick before we go. UK, parts of overseas. We know that international travel has been somewhat banned. What advice do you have for people with regards to international travel?
Well, you have to understand if you're going to travel, and I travel quite a bit, is that you have to understand the environment. Realize that there is no social distancing on an airplane. Realizing the bathroom on the airplane is contaminated with feces and the SARS-CoV virus. Make sure you understand that the airport bathrooms are contaminated with feces. You can imagine somebody symptomatic, asymptomatic, there's no lids on there. You flush that toilet, that virus becomes what we call ultra-aerolized, gets spread all over the bathroom. You have to protect yourself, making sure you have great mask protection, because we know that one component of the virus transmission is airborne. So the world is different. It's shut down. The normal thing that we had before is never going to be the same, because it shows you a Brazil strain can get on an airplane and be in Minnesota in 8 hours. We're a global transportation, global society, and that global society has helped spread the infection viruses much more. And we have other diseases. There's a new Ebola outbreak in Africa right now. There's an outbreak in Bolivia, hemorrhagic fever virus. So we still have to be cognizant of the other diseases and not just realize that the SARS-CoV virus is doing what it does on a global and endemic level, but we also have to be students and be aware that there are other diseases out there that we still have to protect ourselves from. And that's going to be based off of good medicine, good science, education, having the best PPE equipment based off of science and medicine.
All right, Dr. Lane Roller, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us here on the Social Justice Forums, giving us the information that we need to know for a time such as this. Thank you much, my brother.
Daren, I want to give you a salute, like we say in the military, and I look forward to doing, this is part one. Let's do a second one to give people updates. You want to save people's lives. You have access to me. I'm at a whole different level. You have access to me, and as one fellow African American to another African American, use me as your resource. Everybody else does.
Most definitely will, brother. Most definitely will. Dr. Lane Rowland, thank you so much for being here with us here on the Social Justice Forums. Taking a quick break. We'll be back with more show right after this.
There's a special election on Tuesday, March 23rd, and if you live in any of these neighborhoods, you'll want to pay attention. Your councilman, Andrew Cohen, is now a judge, and there are 5 candidates looking to replace him. Whoever wins on March 23rd will join New York City's primary lawmaking body, making decisions that affect you, your family, your home, and even your workplace. Starting in 2021, New York City will use ranked choice voting in primary and special elections for local offices. Ranked choice voting simply means that voters can rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference, instead of casting a vote for just one. You can still vote for just one candidate if you prefer. You can learn everything there is to know about the District 11 City Council race and the candidates by visiting ballotpedia.org and riverdalepress.com. Stay informed, and most importantly, make sure you mail your absentee ballot the day before Election Day on March 23rd, or safely head out to the polls to have your vote count and your voice heard.
And welcome back to the show. Exalt is a New York City-based not-for-profit that's elevating expectations for youth involved in the justice system. The organization actually demonstrates the power of effective educational engagement as a viable alternative to criminal justice involvement for today's young people. The powerful combination of structured classes for tangible skill development, individualized support to navigate the education and justice systems, placement and paid internships, and an alumni network of resources equips youth with the tools and experience to avoid further criminal justice system involvement. Our next guest is actually dedicated her career to creating and leading organizations focused on ensuring equity and justice for court-involved youth. Joining me now to share a little bit more is the executive director of Exalt. Pleased to be joined by Gisele Castro. Gisele, good to have you.
It is so nice to be here with you, Daren. Thank you so much for the invitation. I look forward to this afternoon's conversation.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about youth. And when we talk about youth in the criminal justice system, obviously, it's a very painful thing. When you walk around and you see youth in incarceration, you can go to courtrooms and see a lot of youth engaged in the criminal justice system. But I know that you have given a lifelong work to court-involved youth. Talk to us a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure. So, for the past 2 decades, as you're highlighting and sharing, it is very disheartening to see so many young people involved in our juvenile or criminal justice system. And, as we all know, the US, unfortunately, we're so behind with our youth academically. And then also we have a lot of progress to do in supporting them so that they can move, for those who are involved in the juvenile justice system, to move away from the system. And, overall, my years of work has been really dedicated to advancing our youth. When we talk about the youth, we really are looking at New York City, young people who are coming from some of the most impoverished, neighborhoods and districts. And, this stems from my own experience being born and raised in the Bronx and seeing how many bright, talented, gifted individuals we have, and how quickly it is for a young person to enter the juvenile justice system or criminal justice system. So, looking at bright, intelligent, gifted young people, it really is just offering them an opportunity. And we have done it at Exalt with an educational internship project to advance our young people to think through not just their career, but more specifically, what is it that they would like to do with their lives? And our data begins to suggest that 95% of our young people are not reconvicted of a crime. They're making advancements academically. And more importantly, I would say that at this point, they're happy. And thank you for the question.
Yeah, no, and when we talk about young people obviously making advancements, they are making advancements. Too bad that we don't always report the good that young people are doing as well. But for those that are really caught in that system, I know that you've done some work with policy and advocacy. What is it that you're really focusing on these days presently?
Sure. So these days presently, when we understand, COVID and its implications, and when we begin to understand the challenges that many of our young people have, presently what we're working on is very two specific areas. It is making sure that those young people who have court requirements are, completing their court cases, knowing that the courts are closed at this point in time, but more specifically that our young people still have a component and a space for them to integrate, to begin to think, to begin to plan, and to create a better future for themselves. When we look at time, at this point, we're about to enter the first full year of COVID, its anniversary. And it was March 9th that this organization pivoted. We went and we entered our Zoom platform, and we began to give our young people computers and data plans, knowing that our young people, what they need is access. And what we got to see over the summer was that we launched 17 successful classes at the height when we began to see that in many neighborhoods, crime began to go up. When we also understood that our young people since the month of March were not in school, were not engaged. And what we have been able to offer our young people for the past few years has been our model. It's a curriculum that we've developed. It's culturally relevant. It is an opportunity to give our young people not just a voice, but for them to begin to think through and plan. If COVID has been another thing, as they explain it, that has debilitated their families and their communities, what is it that we can do to ensure that once we're over this chapter, that they are not left behind? And that has been my commitment, the commitment of the organization. When we look at history, we begin to see that this is not the first time that our young people have been, academically behind because of whatever are the challenges that are happening systemically. But I think that, as an organization, we've been so deliberate and so thoughtful in understanding that it's not lip service, that our young people are the future. They really are the future. And as you said, Daren, typically we get to see the bad news, not necessarily the good news. And it is, and when we look at our young people, when we say good news and how they have been able to move past the burden of potential incarceration, to make academic success and to gain access to employment, that is like one of the most powerful stories. And I'll stop there because you can see that I could keep talking about people.
Well, you're on it. I'll just ask a couple questions. You can give me the answer. How about that? But we can work it out. Not a big thing. But talk to me about access, because one of the things that you don't have all the time is access to opportunity. We have done similar shows here. We talked about the summer youth employment program and job cuts that don't give young people the opportunity to really hit the streets and be able to do something in a positive and a productive manner. Talk to us about access for youth and youth access as you see it.
Absolutely. So when we, once again, when we go back, to history, and when we look at, the United States and we see unemployment, and that our youth are underemployed. And we get to see that in the past 10 years, summer jobs have been in a decline, for our young people. When we begin to understand that our young people, they need, as you're saying, resources, our organization has been so deliberate in really cultivating some of the best, business sectors in New York City, some of the best nonprofit in New York Cities, some of the best, companies that they will act as a site, to develop our young people so that they could become interns. And we have a long list of really great, organization and business sectors. And, I want to specifically, talk about COVID and where I believe that the organization is going in the next 2 years. When we entered, this virtual platform, we also understood that businesses were suffering, but it was an opportunity to once again bridge our young people and businesses, so that they can gain access to employment. One of the biggest things that our young people began to do was, understanding how did they improve our social media network, our website, how do they begin to solve problems within their communities. And what we got to see, as I said before, that we launched 17 classes, and right now our young people are doing extraordinarily well. And when I think about the vision, of the organization and where, I plan, to take it in the next 2 years, it is to make sure that our young people are not just, productive, but that they have a place in the workforce. We're talking about 15 to 19-year-olds, and these are teenagers who we're seeing at this point in time that they are getting ready for their adult, path. And it becomes extraordinarily important for me to understand what opportunities are there for our young people. So I'm excited, to know that the organization is supported by, the Robin Hood, by the Power Fund. So many people have really, endorsed the organization. Most recently, the NBA also did the same thing. And when I really carefully see, where are we as New Yorkers, and more specifically as people who are serving young people, we understand the urgency and our moral obligation to ensure that our young people are not left behind. And as I said before, we do it through ensuring that our young people are not involved in the criminal justice system, and that's a big lift, right? That's a big ask.
Right.
And then also that they are making academic gains, and that all of our young people have access to employment.
Share with us a little bit about the impact, because obviously your organization has done some great work in terms of impacting the lives of young people. How do you feel the impact is being carried out in the lives of them as well as parents?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great question. In terms of impact, when I begin to see, what is happening, we're a very data-driven organization, so we get to see the trends, we get to see, what is happening, in New York City, how we're servicing our young people, what can we do to improve, and what are the areas of our absolute strength. And what we have seen over the years is that the number one referral are young people who graduate and they are referring their friends. And that is a testament to our work. That is a testament to our staffing model. That is a testament to our curriculum. And then also where we place our young people when they are interning. Literally we're a youth-driven organization, and we're listening to them. Where is it that they want to go? If they want to become, a musician, it's like this is New York City. If they want to become an artist, we have a lot of art galleries. If they want to become attorneys, we have a lot of law firms. And when we understand a young person who is at risk of, or who is jail bound, and they have the burden of potential incarceration, you could only imagine once a young person's sentence is reduced from a felony to either a misdemeanor or vacated, how much of a burden that we took away from the family. I think that when we understand, how nuanced and complex our system is, and I think that a lot of times, people are thinking, it's like, what is the big thing that the organization is doing? It is exactly what you're saying, Daren, understanding what is it that a suffering mother may be going through, or a suffering dad, getting potentially psychologically prepare and sending their young people away to a detention facility or to prison. But you imagine the spirit that comes to life when a young person's trajectory is reversed. And then all of a sudden, what they're talking about is education. What they're talking about is liberation, understanding the real risk of entering the system. And then also that they have money in their pocket, that they have a way to contribute, to their families. And of course, every family is different. Every family has a very unique, set of circumstances. But what is universal is that level of freedom, which you can't buy, right? You cannot buy, but seeing it over and over and over again, so many families saying, not just in the 1 year that our young people are with us, but the many years out, saying, my young teenager, now an adult son or adult daughter, is doing well. It speaks to our model, it speaks to our curriculum, it says a lot that we have, really thought through what does it mean to have community suffering. And then, we're looking at it more closely now with COVID. What does it mean to have families at this point in time who are suffering? And it's, as our young people say, now there's another layer of pressure. And it's a privilege, to be working with not just Exalt staff and our board of directors, but also other people who are carefully thinking through the future of our teenagers.
So talk to us about what's going on in the future. Obviously, the work continues. COVID impacted you as well as everyone else. How are things going? What do you see happening in the near future, given the midst of as we're navigating through this pandemic?
Yeah, so what I see in the near future is really, at Exalt is a thriving opportunity. We're seeing it immediately. We are coming together actually this week, to plan out our strategic plan, which is, as we call it, going deeper in our work. I have been in the fields for a long time, and I've never seen, anything like this, that the courts are shut down and that we have young people with, pending, court cases. And it is our goal that our young people are not going to go deeper into the system, but that they're going to advance and make specific, progress. Academically, this is another big one for our young people. We've seen that they have been, left behind, but we haven't left our young people behind. And in March, when we come to see, it's going to be the spring. And in the next few months, the school closes, for our young people, but we have been able to support our young people academically. And, I will say that one of the biggest and most impressive opportunities is that we are helping our young people graduate from high school. They're going off to college. The organization is now forming a formal scholarship opportunity for our youth, so that they have access, to funds so they could go off to school. And then, of course, employment and internships, for our young people. We're now here in New York City. We're getting ready to go back into our ways of working. And what the future really holds for us is that we will be working with more young people throughout New York City. We have seen a substantial increase of young people coming in from the Bronx. And I would, reinforce and say that, it's a thriving future, but it will be the future where we will begin to see what does it mean to have young people who are at the center in creating a better response and a better future for our society. And that to me is exciting.
Yeah. So if people want to get connected, what do they do if they want to get connected to the work that you're doing?
So very easy. Look us up at www.exaltyouth.org. You will easily find us. You will begin to see that our youth are at the center of everything. There is a tab if you want to refer a young person to our organization, or if you want to host a young person as an intern, or if you want to support the organization and fund us. There are many ways, for you to literally get a hold of us. We're based in Manhattan, 17 Battery, but right now we're virtually. We have a hybrid model. Of course, we're also in the office, but I think that the easiest way is, to find us online.
Yeah. Well, Gisele, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for coming and being with us here on the Social Justice Forums. The great work that Exalt continues to do, and hopefully we'll have you back. You can talk a little bit more.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Enjoy your day.
All righty. Gisele Castro, our guest here on the Social Justice Forums. Listen, I want to tell you that we are about out of show. I want to thank our guests for joining us, and also want to take the opportunity to tell you, make sure you can watch us every week here, BronxNet Channel 67, and then also catch us on the web. How do you do that? BronxNet.org. Our social media platforms are also BronxNet TV. Be sure to stay connected. We'll bring you another Social Justice Forum next week where we elevate the conversation, we promote civic engagement, and give you an opportunity to find out more about what's going on in the community. Daren, Jaime saying take care and God bless.